Virgo, stop right now and listen, because what you've been telling yourself about this silence is wrong. You think you're being ghosted. You think they've disappeared, lost interest, moved on without explanation, and that story you're telling yourself is creating a specific kind of pain that's eating at you every single day. But what if that's not what's actually happening? What if there's something else going on that you can't see from where you're standing? Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and subscribe to stay connected. Now let's get into what silence actually means and what it doesn't. Pay attention, because this is important. You've been spiraling, checking your phone obsessively, rereading old messages, trying to figure out where it went wrong, analyzing the last conversation for clues, looking for the moment everything shifted, and you keep landing on the same conclusion. They ghosted you. They're done. They checked out without having the decency to say so. And that conclusion is destroying you, not just because they're gone, because of how they left. Because ghosting feels like erasure. Like you didn't matter enough to warrant an actual goodbye. Like whatever you shared was so insignificant they could just vanish without consequence. That's the story, and that story is killing you. But what if it's not true? What if you're interpreting their silence through your own fear instead of through what's actually happening? Let me show you what else this could be. First possibility. They're not ghosting. They're drowning. Something happened in their life that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own capacity being maxed out. Could be work exploded, could be family crisis, could be mental health nosedived, could be they're dealing with something so consuming that responding to anyone, even people they care about, feels impossible right now. And I know what you're thinking. If they cared, they'd find 2 seconds to send a text. But that's not how it works when someone's actually overwhelmed. When you're drowning, you can't wave. You're using every bit of energy just to keep your head above water. Texting back feels like one more thing on a list of things you can't handle. And the people you care about most, sometimes they're the hardest to respond to, because you know they deserve more than a half-present response, more than "I'm fine" when you're not, so you go silent. Not because you don't care, because you care too much to show up badly. That might be what's happening here. They might be in survival mode, handling something heavy, barely functioning, and your messages are sitting unread, not because they don't matter, but because they can't open them without falling apart. Second possibility, they're not ghosting. They're processing. Something about your last interaction, your last conversation, something you said or they said triggered something deep, and they need space to work through it before they can engage again. Maybe you got vulnerable and it scared them. Maybe they got vulnerable and now they're embarrassed. Maybe the connection is getting real, and real is terrifying when you've been hurt before. Maybe they're falling for you, and that's the scariest thing that could happen right now. So they pulled back, not to ghost, to think, to feel, to figure out what they want to do with these big feelings. And from your side, it looks like disappearing. But from their side, it's the opposite. They're so present with thoughts of you, they can't think straight. They're replaying conversations, analyzing their own feelings, trying to decide if they're ready for what this is becoming. And that processing takes time. Time that feels eternal to you. Time that makes you think the worst. But for them, it's necessary. It's how they make sense of things. It's how they protect both of you from them moving forward before they're ready. Third possibility, they're not ghosting. They're scared you're ghosting them. Something in how you communicated last made them think you were pulling away. Maybe you were less responsive than usual. Maybe your tone felt off. Maybe you said something that sounded like ending, and they interpreted that as you losing interest. So they backed off to protect themselves, um, to avoid being the one who cares more, to avoid being rejected, to avoid chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught. So now you're both silent, both waiting, both thinking the other person checked out, both afraid to reach out and confirm the rejection you're assuming. That's a tragedy. Two people who actually want to talk, both staying silent out of fear, both creating the exact outcome they're trying to avoid. Fourth possibility, they're not ghosting, they're stuck. They want to respond. They've drafted messages. They've thought about what to say. But every draft feels wrong. Too casual, too heavy, too much, too little. They're overthinking it. Paralyzed by wanting to say the right thing and having no idea what that is. So days pass, and the longer they wait, the harder it gets to respond, because now they have to explain the gap, have to acknowledge the silence, have to admit they've been weird, and that feels humiliating. So they stay stuck, wanting to reach out but not knowing how to bridge the gap they accidentally created. Fifth possibility, they're not ghosting. They're respecting what they think you want. Maybe last time you talked, you mentioned needing space, needing to focus on something, needing time, and they're giving you that. They're staying back because they think that's what you asked for. Even if you didn't mean it long term, even if you just meant you needed a day or two, they interpreted it as a bigger request, and they're honoring it even though it's killing them. They're checking your social media, seeing that you're alive, you're okay, you're functioning, and they're telling themselves, see, they're fine without me. I was right to give them space. Meanwhile, you're over here thinking they don't care because they're not reaching out. Both of you misunderstanding, both of you suffering unnecessarily. Sixth possibility, and this one's harder. They're not ghosting in the traditional sense, but they are withdrawing. Not because they don't care, because they care and they've decided this can't work. Maybe because of timing, maybe because of circumstance, maybe because of their own limitations. And instead of having the hard conversation where they explain that, they're hoping the fade will communicate it. They're conflict avoidant. They're cowardly about endings. They're bad at goodbyes. So they're choosing the slow pullback over the direct conversation. And that's not ghosting exactly. It's something else. Something that feels similar but comes from a different place. They're not erasing you. They're mourning what they've decided can't continue. And they're doing it silently because they don't know how to do it any other way. Now, here's what you need to do with all these possibilities. You stop assuming the worst. You stop telling yourself the story that you don't matter, that you were disposable, that they never cared, because you don't actually know that. You're guessing. You're interpreting silence through your insecurity, and insecurity always interprets ambiguity as rejection. But silence isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's just silence. Sometimes it means nothing about you and everything about them. So here's what you do. You reach out once, clearly. Not accusatory, not demanding, not dripping with hurt, just honest, just direct. Hey, I've noticed we haven't talked in a while. I don't know if you need space, if something's going on, if I did something, or if this is your way of ending things. But I'd rather know than assume. Can we talk? Something like that. direct, clear, non-blaming. That message does a few things. It shows you're not afraid of clarity. It shows you're not playing games. It shows you respect yourself enough to ask for what you need instead of sitting in uncertainty. And it gives them an opportunity to respond, to explain, to clarify. And their response or lack of response tells you everything. If they respond and explain, great. Now you have information. Now you can decide what to do with that information. If they respond and it's vague, deflecting, breadcrumby, that's information too. If they don't respond at all, that's the clearest information. That's them showing you who they are through inaction. And you get to decide if that's acceptable to you. But at least you know, at least you're not making up stories. At least you're operating from actual data instead of fear-based assumptions. Now, here's what you don't do. You don't reach out multiple times. You don't chase. You don't beg for explanation. One clear message. That's it. That's all your dignity allows. After that, you accept their silence as an answer. Not the answer you wanted, but an answer nonetheless. And you move accordingly. You stop checking their social media. You stop analyzing their activity. You stop looking for signs that they're thinking about you. You redirect that energy toward your own life, your own healing, your own forward motion. Because here's the truth about ghosting, real or perceived. It says more about the ghoster than the ghosted. It reveals character, capacity, emotional maturity. Someone who can disappear on you without explanation is someone who doesn't handle hard things well, who avoids conflict, who prioritizes their comfort over your closure. And that's not someone you want to build with anyway. So whether they're actually ghosting or whether something else is happening, the question becomes the same. Is this person showing up the way you need them to? Are they capable of the communication you require? And if the answer is no, does the reason matter? Whether they're ghosting maliciously or pulling back for understandable reasons, the result is the same. You're in uncertainty, you're in pain, you're not getting your needs met, and you have to decide if you're willing to tolerate that. Some situations warrant patience, warrant grace, warrant understanding. If someone's genuinely going through something, if they communicate that, if they ask for time, you can choose to give that. But if they're just silent, if they're leaving you in limbo without explanation, that's not something you have to accept. That's not something you have to make excuses for. You're allowed to need clear communication. You're allowed to need consistency. You're allowed to walk away from dynamics that create anxiety instead of peace. So here's what I need you to hear. Stop torturing yourself with ghost stories. Stop creating narratives about what their silence means. Reach out once if you need clarity. And then, regardless of their response, choose yourself. Choose the interpretation that protects your peace. Choose the story that doesn't diminish your worth. Choose to believe that anyone who can disappear on you without explanation isn't someone aligned with your future. Not because they're bad, because they're not ready, not capable, not yours. And that's okay. Everyone isn't for you. The right people don't leave you guessing. Don't leave you in painful silence. They communicate, they show up, They handle hard things with honesty. And if this person isn't doing that, whether